Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. I'm your coach, Angela Pugh. Thank you for hanging out with me today, listening to the pod. You know, life definitely has a way of throwing us challenges we never asked for. And trauma often becomes a part of our story before we even realize it. And know that if you're sitting and kind of facing this, maybe just realizing you have some trauma to work through, know that healing isn't just possible, it is transformative. And it really begins when we acknowledge the impact our experiences have had on us, and we choose to face the pain rather than numb it. It's not easy, but doing this work is what opens the door to real, profound transformation. And that's what recovery is. It allows you to reclaim your story, rebuild your self-confidence, and build emotional resilience. My guest today is Kristen Boyce. She's a marriage and family therapist and a psychotherapist, 25 plus years of experience. And I found her through her podcast, just listening to podcasts, where she talked about the trauma of natural disaster. And this was something that really hit close to home for me. And you'll hear me share my story in this episode as well. But right now, more than ever, for those grappling with the aftermath of the California fires, the displacement, loss, the emotional weight of witnessing destruction, it's even more important to recognize the impact of our experiences and that healing is possible. Now, this episode was recorded in November, so the fires weren't happening then. But as usual, the universe aligns everything exactly as it should be, and this conversation became more relevant than I could have ever known. In this process of sobriety, recovery, and healing, know that you are not alone and you don't have to carry it all by yourself. By choosing to face the pain, you give yourself the gift of clarity and strength and the chance to rebuild not just your life and your circumstances, but the way you feel inside. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about transforming. And together today with my guest, Kristen Boyce, we'll explore how to take just those first steps toward a new chapter where you can have hope and resilience and growth and true recovery and transformation. You deserve that freedom. I hope you love this episode. Here we go with Kristen. Kristen, thank you so much for coming on and doing this show with me. I'm really excited to get into this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. You're doing important work in the world, and I'm grateful to be here.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Well, let's start with, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you and what you do?
So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a private practice with 15 clinicians, host a podcast, Close the Chapter. I am trauma trained. So if you've heard of EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, for those that might not know what it is, I work a lot on anxiety, depression and relationships, which a lot is driven underneath by trauma. We know this. Yes. Nobody had a perfect childhood.
Most people with addiction definitely know that.
Yes, for sure.
Plenty of trauma to go around. So I found you, well, we had a person in common on our podcast, which is how you first popped up for me. And then I was listening to you, one of your episodes about healing from natural disasters. And it really stood out to me because I feel like this is a piece of trauma that is kind of unknown, right? I think one of the frustrating things to me about trauma is people don't know all the things that can be trauma. when you hear the word trauma, most people think war, assault, like the really big
Yes.
T traumas. But there are all of these regular, everyday life things that can be trauma also. And so when I heard you talking about the natural disaster stuff, I was like, God, that so resonates with me. I've lost two homes to fire at very different times, one in childhood and one as an adult. But those are things like I would have never thought of that as trauma, right? When I started learning about trauma, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a whole other layer. So same with you. I so appreciate your work and all the things that you talk about and your podcast. Oh, so many good topics.
Thank you so much. And to be not one, but two fires, that's a
Yeah.
lot. So you went through one in childhood and one as an adult?
Yes. And in
Wow.
childhood, like literally like our whole house burnt down. I mean, almost the entire thing. Like it was crazy. Really couldn't save hardly anything. And when you go through something like that, not even if your belongings aren't destroyed in the fire, they're destroyed by the water and the smoke damage. Um, and then as an adult, my apartment building caught on fire. So my actual apartment didn't burn, but my dogs were in there. And
Oh,
of course, everything was destroyed with smoke damage. My dogs were okay, thank God. But you could see, like right above my front door, you could see where the flames were just starting to go into my apartment when they got the fire. But it was crazy. Like I got home from work. I was a bartender. I got home from work. It's like 3:00 in the morning and I pull in my parking lot and there's flashing lights and fire trucks everywhere. They told me that my dogs probably didn't survive. Like it was insanity.
that had to be absolutely triggering, them saying your dogs aren't going to, or they thought that your dogs wouldn't survive. And so they're
They thought
telling
my
you this.
dogs were gone. And I was drunk, of course. And I was a nightmare of a human, especially drunk. and, and I went, like, they wouldn't let me go in my apartment. My apartment was right on the corner on the lower level. So, like, when I pulled in my parking lot, you could see my apartment right there. And I was like, I want my dogs. Because in my head, even drunk, I was like, you can't tell me that you didn't go in and check. Like, what if they were kids? Like if somebody had their kids in there, like you would go look, you know what I mean? And I
Of
was like,
course.
I want my dogs right now. I don't give a fuck if they're dead. I want them right here with me right now. And I was a nightmare. And finally, this one dude was like, I will go check. If you will go sit down and be quiet, I will go check. And next thing I know, he comes out with my dogs and he's like, they're okay. They're scared, but they're okay. And I was like, thank you.
So had you not done that, you don't know, right? Had you not
Yeah.
advocated, drunk or not, for yourself
Yeah.
and your
I
dogs.
mean, the fire was already out when I got there, but yeah, the whole thing, I mean, it was tragic. Like it was really horrific. And then of course living in a hotel for a period of time, like it was crazy.
Well, you lose your safe place. So as a child, how old were you as a
Yeah.
child when that happened?
I think I was in 7th grade maybe. I was 12.
Which is a pivotal point. Like you're going through, your
Yeah.
pre-adolescence, adolescence. I mean, this is a huge time. And to have everything gone
Right.
at 12, that is a
Right.
huge trauma. And then you don't really talk about it much and you move on. I mean, right? Our parents didn't know to process the emotions, to process the grief, to process the sadness, the anger. Like no one tells us this. No, our parents didn't know that how essential that is to healing.
Yeah. Yeah, but super grateful at the same time that like my mom is just the most loving and kind human on the planet. And she is always, every moment of my life, she has just been the most beautiful, perfect, warm, cozy comfort blanket. Like in every situation, like she just makes everything better. I always joke in my life, I'm like, I don't care how old I am. I'm 52 now. I never, ever will outgrow needing my mommy.
She sounds like an amazing human that has
Oh, she's
compassion and
incredible.
kindness and love. And so that was probably really helpful to have during that time. I mean, her
Yes, because I didn't feel so insecure, unstable because I was with her,
right.
right? So like our little family unit was okay. and nobody was home. So there weren't those fears of anybody being injured or anything. Nobody was home. But I think I didn't have as big of a response because I had her and she just made everything okay
Yeah, she
always.
comforted you. So that's number
Yeah.
one. We need comfort during times of trauma. We need comfort. If we have a warm, empathic witness that helps us, especially a mother or a parent,
Yeah.
it helps us move through it, get to the other side, even though those losses still impact you because you lost all your belongings, right? You lost your secure
Yeah.
place. It still affects us. We just don't know to what degree it's affecting us later in life. And then to have another fire, I mean, that's like, what are
Yeah.
the odds that you'd be going through this a second time?
So crazy. Okay, I do have a trauma question. I have heard that when something traumatic happens, the quicker you can kind of have a processing of the feelings, the less the trauma settles in. Those are all in my words. So that's how I understand it.
Capturing
Is
it
that
well. Yes.
correct?
Yes. So we know through research, if you can process the body's sensations, your emotions, your thoughts, and beliefs, okay, like I am not safe. So we oftentimes that's one that will kind of get embedded in the nervous system. So we're processing what your body is experiencing because the body will take it on, and we're moving it up and out of the body. So we're not pushing it down, suppressing it, moving away from it and numbing it. We know if we can reprocess it more, the quicker we can reprocess it, the better. Now, there are some situations where we're not ready for that.
Yeah.
So we want to hold delicate space for a person when they are ready, that we're there to, or they seek support and working through that trauma. Most people don't know that. Most people aren't aware that if you work on it sooner rather than later, you're actually going to lessen your chance of developing PTSD,
Yeah.
post-traumatic stress disorder.
I read this many, many years ago, and it just has always stuck with me. And even through working with my clients, through my guys, I own men's sober living houses, same thing with them. And even like my nieces and nephews, right? In everyday life, when things happen, somebody falls or somebody gets hurt. Or the other day, one of my nephews was carrying around one of the smaller nephews and dropped him. And the little one started crying, right? And the older one was completely freaked out, but everybody was hyper focused on the one that got dropped. And I recognized my 5-year-old was completely freaked out too. And I just thought of that. I'm like, oh, let's jump in and have some conversation. Let him know he's okay. Like, let's kind of process through some of this so it doesn't settle in. So it just stuck with me, and I've always held that close.
Well, look at you. Then you can take that and hold space for, they're all tending to the little one, and you can say, oh, I'm here for you. And I think that's the one thing we don't recognize often is when there are multiple people involved in a trauma, everyone needs that empathic witness.
Yeah.
Not just one person. So we tend to focus on maybe one, and really if someone's witnessed domestic violence, they've witnessed emotional abuse, they've witnessed a car accident. So I'll tell my girls, look away, close your eyes, because it can be images that are imprinted in your nervous system. So you can start having that image or that sound or that smell come back at unexpected times. So we really want to address it as soon as possible with everybody on that scene or anybody that has been a part of that trauma.
Yeah, so huge. I could talk about trauma all day. It's so fascinating to me. And especially as an adult, getting to learn more about it and understand it and process it and heal from it so much when I didn't even know I needed to for so many years. It's a really fascinating topic, and to understand how much it dictates your life and the things that you're doing and your reactions and responses and things you didn't even know were there. And like I tell my clients, I'm like, listen, trauma is a brain injury, because people want to think like they're just going to power through and everything will be okay. And I'll do CBT. And I'm like, well, that's cute, but this happened to your brain. Like, it kind of almost doesn't have anything to do with you, and it has to be healed on a brain level,
You can't outthink it.
Right.
So this is
Right.
one of the things that, You can't outthink it. So they're like, I'm just going to, I'm just going to work more. What we end up doing is building defenses and
Yeah.
unhealthy coping strategies.
Right.
And I don't think people realize that trauma can even start in utero, like when mother is pregnant.
Yes.
Okay. We don't realize that this can happen early, and you're carrying this imprint in your nervous system from a
Yeah.
very early age. And medical procedures, people would understand if you had a
Yeah.
medical procedure as a young child, or throughout your lifetime, that can be imprinted in the body and be a survival response. And survival takes us into, as you know, fight, flight, freeze,
Right.
or fawn, or these other flop, which is
Right.
like the faint response to protect us. And we take that into relationships. This is the number one thing people don't realize. They're like, I'm okay, I'm good, it's all in the
Right.
past now. And I'm like, how's that going for you now in your relationships?
Yeah.
It will show up.
And P.S., none of us are good. Right? Like,
We all have stuff,
yes,
right?
everybody, I'm
We all have
good. It's
stuff.
like, no, none of us are good. We've all got stuff. We all have a ton of baggage, whether you realize it or not, right? Things happen and we internalize it differently, and we all have stuff.
And I think recognizing that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not
Right.
defective. You're not a bad person. You're not a bad mother. You're not a bad fill in the blank
Right.
father. That shame can really take us down that dark abyss and feel like something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mess. I'm a this, I'm a that. We fill in the blank. And then what that does is that takes us away from really what? Healing.
Yeah.
But it's a journey. I think trauma is a journey of a willingness to sit in discomfort.
Yeah. And you can't necessarily dig into it too early either. Certainly like in the addiction realm, I was just talking to a brand new client I just took on, and she's not actually an alcoholic herself. Her husband is an alcoholic. And I'm working with her on healthy coping skills and boundaries and communication and all of those things. And she was talking about, she's like, well, I'm not sure what to do. Like, do I need a therapist? Do I need a psychiatrist? Do I need to do EMDR? Do I, whatever? And I said, well, listen, you have to be mindful when you start picking at wounds, right? And you have to make sure that you have the right support systems in place to start picking at wounds because you don't necessarily know how it's going to happen. I've done EMDR where I feel like nothing happened. I've done EMDR sessions. I did an EMDR session one time and I went home and slept for 17 hours.
Yeah.
Like there is an element of unknown, but you have to be in a situation with a good support system to be able to cope with whatever your brain is going to go through in that healing process.
Yeah. And I think that in addition to that, you have to be ready,
Yeah. Yeah.
Some
I didn't
people-
start EMDR till I was 13 years sober, right? I didn't start digging into that stuff really heavy. I was 13 years sober before I was anywhere near open to dealing with it.
And I think that's important for each individual to notice, where are they in this process? If someone's saying you need to go get help, you're probably not, that's not really going to help because you're not ready.
Yeah.
So trauma work is definitely a support system for sure you need, and coping mechanisms. Like we work on that first, sometimes if we can, so we can deal with we're going to unlock, which is a lot of grief. Underneath it is a ton of grief work.
Yeah.
And I say, if you've seen the movie Shawshank Redemption, have you seen that movie?
Years ago.
Okay. Dupain, I think is his name, Andy. He gets falsely accused of murdering his wife. Anyways, he's in jail and he has to go and he escapes eventually. He's innocent, but he escapes, but he has to go through the sewer to get out, to get to the other side where it's this beautiful, right, tree and light. That's kind of what you have to go through the crapper. You have to go through the crap to get to the other side, to get to the light, to get to the relief, to get to your authentic self. Otherwise, you're going to have this picture of therapy where it's like drive-through therapy. And you're like, just supersize me in 2 sessions. I'm good. I'm like, yeah, nope. Nope. We got to go through the crapper. We got to go through because, at the end of the sewer, you're going to get out the other side and there's where the freedom lies. It's a willingness to feel, to face, and to deal with the pain of the past. And that's hard.
Yeah. It's so good though.
It's
I mean,
the
when
best
you
thing you'll
start,
ever do. That's why I
yes,
believe in this work. It's
when,
the best work you'll ever do in your life.
yes, when you start to see the effects because it's so weird too. I thought I was going to do EMDR and it was going to be this magical moment and, the weight was going to be lifted, and it doesn't work like that at all. It's like all of a sudden it'll be a month later and I'll be in a situation where I just don't have the same response I used to, or something won't affect me the way it used to. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, I'm like, look at that. Like a month ago, that would have really triggered me. That would have been a situation, but here I am all healthy and feeling good and coping with it and staying zen. Like that's more how it works. But when you start seeing those effects, it's like, oh, thank God, because it removes so much chaos, and a lot of
Gives you
this,
clarity.
it gives you clarity, but it's like your self-esteem too, because nobody feels good walking around feeling like you're a mess all the time, right? Like I didn't feel good feeling like I couldn't handle my life or handle situations when I was super reactive, like really early in my sobriety. And I was angry and, condescending and judgmental. Like you don't feel good about yourself when those are your behaviors and your responses. So when all of a sudden you have tools that can start softening those edges, like that is such a magical piece of recovery to me.
It really is. I've seen people think things that you think, I don't know how they're ever going to work through it. Oh my goodness. And the freedom on the other side. They're like, I had
Yes.
no idea that this was
Yes.
even possible. I didn't even know that I could feel this way.
Yeah.
And I could feel what I'm feeling. I'm actually accessing all my feelings, but I'm feeling some joy.
Yeah.
The shame is lifting. I'm working through my shame and guilt and anxiety and depression. And now I feel like I can handle it. Before I felt like it's a shit show. I can't handle it. I'm a mess. And now I feel like I can handle it.
Yeah.
I can
So
handle
good.
that's like such an empowerment place to be, from disempowerment to empowerment. It's the greatest gift you'll ever give yourself and your family.
Yeah.
It's really, truly, it's worth it.
It's worth it for sure.
It's
I agree.
worth it. Because what hard do you want to choose? Continuing the hard of, an addiction or whatever you're facing? That's hard. And
Really
that's
hard.
not going to end well, right? Or there's going to be a different kind of hard, but there's going to be a payoff at the end.
Right. I hope getting better sleep is at the top of your list of New Year's resolutions, and I'm going to give you your first step with Cozy Earth's best-selling bedding. In recovery, sleep is essential to healing and restoring balance in your life. Quality rest helps rebuild your brain and your body. If you've been following me for any length of time, in the last several months, I have been super focused on getting better sleep. I've never slept well. I know how important it is, and I know it's something that's really holding me back. And Cozy Earth bedding is one of the things that I've added in my sleep routine that has made such a difference. And it's made a huge difference in two ways. One, it keeps my body temperature a little bit lower. I have a king size sheet set in white. It keeps my body temperature lower, which is hugely important for me. And two, these things are so soft. Like you definitely feel the difference. They're made from 100% premium viscose from bamboo. They're breathable and they are the softest sheets I've ever slept on, and they get softer with every wash. And as if incredible sleep isn't enough of a benefit, Cozy Earth offers a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. This is a no-brainer, you guys. And because giving is my love language, when you visit cozyearth.com, make all your selections of the incredible things you want to get, you can use my exclusive 40% off code, Angela. Yes, you heard me right. 40% off. Cozyearth.com. Pick your stuff when you get to checkout. Use my code Angela. And if you get a post-purchase survey, let them know you heard about Cozy Earth from Addiction Unlimited podcast. Again, 40% off code Angela. A better year starts with better sleep, my friend. Wrap yourself in Cozy Earth. I want to read something that was on your website that I absolutely love. This is a major theme of conversation for me also is transition, right? Because we go through so many transitions in life, and certainly from active addiction to recovery is this major transition, and then all the transitions it brings. And it says, if you're in a period of transition or have felt trapped where you are for too long, we'll peel back the layers of your doubts and fears and uncover the essence of truth already within you, so you can open the door to an incredible new phase of your life, no longer bogged down from the negativity holding you back. And I was like, well, damn, isn't that what the whole world wants? Like that just summed it up. That's what we're all going for.
Yeah, we're tired of feeling stuck at the end of the day. I mean, and that nothing we do is working, and we're trying so hard but we can't get ahead, and things just keep happening, which it does. I mean,
It
life
does.
does keep
Yeah.
happening,
Yeah.
right? And then how do we face it? How do we deal with it? How do we move through it? And when you have that sense that I can handle it, I want to go back to that. It gives you the courage to face it. Because that's what
Yeah.
people are like, I can't handle that. I'm not going to be able to get up in the morning. I'm not going to be able to function. I'm not going to be able to take care of my kids or do my job. And when they actually start facing it, they realize I actually feel better. I actually can handle it. I actually can move through it. I actually have another sense of self and freedom. And I think that's the difference when you start doing the work from I can't handle it to I can do a transition. I can handle that.
It's
And we're
so,
developmentally stuck. So a lot of times, if let's say we start drinking at 13, we're stuck emotionally,
yes.
13 or younger, as you
Yes.
know. And so what we do in doing this healing work is we're really working on growing up developmentally.
Yes.
So I'm no longer showing up as a 13 angry year old with my partner. I am now showing up with my adult self, and I can actually calm myself down, soothe myself, and speak in a calm way. Whereas my 13-year-old self is pissed off.
Right.
I'm pissed off. Don't tell me what to do. So it's starting to recognize, how old do you feel? Where are you on that developmental emotional continuum? And that's what this starts to do too. It starts to grow us up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we talk about in recovery. It's growing up. It's emotional maturity. And in 12 steps, we say you're growing up in public, right? Because now you're
Yes.
actually an adult and you have eyes on you. And so you are kind of growing up in a very public way. And that's not always graceful, but it's necessary. And I think I was probably about emotionally, I got sober at 33. I was probably emotionally about 18. I might be giving myself a little bit of credit, but I was
Okay.
somewhere around there. But it was challenging, right? And where that came out so much was in relationships for me. And it just all of the dysfunction, being an incredibly insecure, anxious, no self-esteem person, right? Like relationships were always so challenging for me. I just couldn't do it. And when you have no self-worth, obviously you're not going to go out in the world and pick great partners, right? So I just had a series years. I just dated the exact same type of guy over and over again and lied to and cheated on, which just furthers the damage and the trauma and the no self-esteem and low self-worth. Like it was just this incredible cycle that was so painful and awful. And I had to just do a lot of work around it.
Yeah. What do you think was the most powerful work for you in that? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, like a good alcoholic, I have to have a rock bottom for everything. And I had a major relationship rock bottom. And I was dating a guy, I was 4 years sober. And I was dating a guy the same type of guy that I always dated my whole adult life, right? Drunk, drugs, super successful, high functioning, life of the party guy, dishonest. I mean, all the things. And I was I was a bartender, and one of my coworkers called me one night after work, and I didn't work that night. I was at home, and he called me and he's like, "Hey, Chris was here tonight." And I go, oh yeah. And he goes, yeah, with his girlfriend. And I go, oh, that's interesting. And apparently there was this other female that he had been with a couple of years, and he was a real estate developer. So he had multiple condos. And because the first thing went through my head, I was like, dude, I'm at his house. Like, I'm at his house all the time. Like, there's no sign of a female. I would have noticed if he had a live-in girlfriend. But he had a couple of different condos, right? And he lived with her in one, and I was at another. And I mean, I didn't live there, but yeah, it was a crazy situation. But it was the moment that I said to myself, like, what the fuck are you doing? This is insanity, right? You're 4 years sober. You've completely changed your life. I was in school at the time because I went to college right about that time. And I was like, how are you still picking this guy? Like, this isn't congruent. This doesn't fit your life. Why are you still picking this guy? Why are you putting up with this behavior? Because there were a ton of red flags, right? I just ignored them. Like, I caught this dude lying to me a million times, and I just kept moving forward with the relationship because I had no self-value. So I would just let him get away with everything. I had no boundaries. So that night I sat down and I made a list of all the things, all the qualities I wanted in my perfect man, right? Like, who's the guy I want? And I made a list of my deal breakers. And as I read down the list, I realized I was not any of the things on the list. And that was my real moment of like, well, you need to get your shit together, you know? And my focus became solely working on that list and becoming those qualities myself. That was a huge piece of work for me. And then I would say the next part of that was realizing that it was my responsibility, not any longer being the victim, because I always loved to be the victim. Addicts love to be the victim. We love for everything to be everybody else's fault, and we do not take responsibility for anything. So I was always like, this stuff happens to me, right? I'm this really great partner and this really great girlfriend, and I'm loyal and honest, and these guys cheat on me and lie to me. And my sponsor said to me one time, he's like, well, that's all fine and dandy, but you picked him. And I was like, oh my God.
You're like,
yes, I did. So that was a huge piece of the puzzle, was realizing that it was my responsibility, right? That they were my choices. These guys were my choices, and I did this. I wasn't the victim. And really owning that, right? And then starting to understand how to stop doing that and setting the boundaries and letting them go. If somebody sits across the table and lies to you, to your face, let them go, you know? But it's been a very long journey, but it's been incredible.
yeah, sounds like you've done some real deep self-work to be able to get to where you are. And that's the thing, people think. I think it's one thing to get sober, and it's another thing to do the deeper work.
Yes. Sober is just the beginning.
That's just the start.
Oh my gosh. And people do not get that. Yes.
Sobriety is huge.
Yes. But people think they're going to quit drinking and problem solved, and they're going to live happily ever after. And I'm like, dude, all that does is puts you in a clear mind where you can start working on the actual problems.
And then it's a willingness to work on the deeper stuff without transferring that addiction to something else. So what I often see with clients is they'll transfer it to food. They'll transfer it to shopping. They'll transfer it to men, women. I mean, pornography, sex. I mean, we could fill in the blank. Okay.
Yes.
So it's really work,
the gym.
I mean, we can go
sugar.
on and on, right? So it's really noticing what's the hole what's down there, and then really committing to doing the deeper work, which is a lot of inner child work, looking at your patterns, connecting to emotions, processing them rather than shoving them down, moving away from them, and working on these protector parts, these defenses that we've built up to help us survive things. And now they're not adaptive anymore. They're causing you problems. And so it's, how do we decide that I'm gonna get sober, and then I'm committing in tandem with that, doing this other work. Otherwise, the relapses, you're gonna have a higher chance of relapse. We know, right?
Right. Yeah, because you're
And
not going to be able to cope with your feelings. I mean, that's the crux of the whole thing, right? Is we can't cope with feelings, good ones or bad ones. We don't like any of them. So,
no, none of them.
so
Well, then that's
anything,
where a feeling comes up. So then I'm going to go eat my feelings. I'm going to
right?
go, we work my feel. We have all those. And we're really never taught how to deal with feelings. If you really think about
Yeah.
it, who was really taught how to deal with feelings? And were they all welcome, or was just happiness welcome? Or maybe anger was acceptable in the family? What did you learn about feelings? I had someone say the other day, Grandpa died. Mom came in and said, "No, no, no, no." He was crying. He was no, 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 no. Don't cry. You need to be strong for your dad. So what did he learn?
Right.
Don't be feeling those feelings. It's not okay for me to feel. You gotta buck it up,
Right.
and you gotta be there for your dad. These little messages impact us, and that we carry them so subconsciously forward in our relationships. And then we pick a guy or a gal, doesn't matter, and they're like, well, they're not emotionally available. I'm like, well, how are you accessing your feelings? We've
Right.
got to look within to see, am I connected to my feelings? How am I managing my feelings? Am I even regulated, or am I so dysregulated and reactive that this is causing disconnection in our relationship? It's so much self-reflection in this work. And
Yeah,
that's why a willingness to do it.
this is huge too, because again, we always want to point the finger at the other person, right? Everybody always wants it to be an external issue, but it really is an internal issue. And most of the things were installed in us as children, right? Like, of course, you have experiences and traumas and things like that as an adult, but so many of those habits, those things that we're taught as kids. Like, that stuff is in there and it's deep.
Oh, that it's the deepest work we'll do. You know why? Because anytime I have a couple in my office and they're like, we don't want to go back to our past. I'm like, that's great, but you're repeating patterns based on what you learned and what you saw and what you witnessed. And if we don't go back and tend to that and start going, oh yeah, who did you marry? Oh, I married my dad. Oh, I married
Right.
my mom. Oh, I married, my grandpa. Or oh, and they're not the same
Right.
people. They
Right.
don't even look like they're in the same package.
Yeah.
They look like they're in a
Yes.
totally different package.
Yes.
But underneath it, it's a familiar pattern. What is the brain like? Familiarity,
Yep.
predictability.
Yep.
So we unconsciously pick that person because you're like, oh, I can predict this. Oh, I know it's coming next. Oh, this feels comfortable.
Familiar.
And so we have to work on all these patterns that we've gotten into. Where did they even come from?
Right. Now, see, I get the same thing in coaching. People will tell me, well, I don't need to go back to all the childhood stuff. And I'm like, well, listen, we don't need to start there. I said, but at some point in conversation, you're going to start to connect dots. Like, I'm just telling you, it's how
I
it
don't think you
goes.
can heal without going back to childhood stuff at some
Right.
point. I believe that in my soul after doing this for 25 years. I believe it'll take you so far, but it'll come back up.
Yeah.
You'll have a different relationship, and boom, you're like, I thought I worked through that, and boom, here it comes.
Yeah.
And when you do that, and you're willing to go, okay, and not to blame our childhood. That is not the purpose. So
Right.
people are like, I don't want to blame my parents. You're not blaming them at all. But we all have stuff. There was no such
Right.
thing as perfect. But I don't think we can get out of healing without going backwards. I just don't think it's possible. We'll get so far, but I don't think we'll get all the way there.
So this is an interesting thing that I did an EMDR intensive over the summer, and this was kind of a fascinating thing that my therapist said to me that I had never heard with EMDR before. And she said, we want to identify the negative cognition, right? Like for me, oftentimes is I'm not worthy or I'm not
Negative
lovable,
belief. Yes.
right? The negative belief. And then we want to get back to the earliest memory of feeling that way. And she said, I want you to think of a plant and you have all these branches and stuff that come off the main stem of the plant. She said, but we want to get to the stem and we want to go all the way down to the root memory. And that's the one we're really targeting. And I was like, oh, because then it unfolds all of it. Like that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that I can get to my root memory of, all of these negative beliefs. Like, I don't know if I could do that at all, but But it was just a really fascinating way to think about it that made so much sense to me. And I had never heard it explained that way.
Yeah, I love that. How that's a great metaphor for it. We liken it to like if I have the belief that I am not good enough, okay? And that's my core belief. So I believe I'm not good enough. I can come up now. I have that we call these neural networks, and I have a channel down here where I can remember, let's say I didn't do well in third grade. My parents got divorced. Okay, I didn't do well, so I'm stupid. Okay, this is the belief. Now it starts. But I am not good enough. Now I have a different memory of maybe another time I embarrassed myself. And so we have these different channels that all are connected to I'm not good enough. So we want to go down each of the channels and try to clear those neural networks to see if we can get relief on I am not good enough.
Yeah.
That embedded shame that we feel. And we can't do it without working on. So EMDR we work on body sensations because everything's stored in the nervous system. It's why autoimmune issues, health issues are there. It's really not all the time, but most of the time it's rooted in trauma.
For sure.
We have to work on the emotions of it too. So cognition gets us so far. We have to work on all of those to be able to clear the channel, so to speak. We don't erase it, but we lessen the trigger for it. And that's why EMDR and brain spotting and somatic experiencing and some of these other trauma modalities are so helpful because they go to the root.
Yeah.
They go to the root. We go to the touchstone memory is what it's called, your first memory. We go to the touchstone memory. If we can't get there, that's okay. The body will tell us.
Right.
The body will show us. And you don't have to maybe have what we call like a memory you recall, which is an explicit memory. It might be a memory that's just in the nervous system called an implicit memory. And we can get to that just with body sensations. So a lot of people that have had trauma, they go, I don't remember. I don't even hardly remember my childhood. I barely remember what I had for breakfast.
I thought that would hold me back from doing EMDR because I just don't have a lot of memories of actual situations.
And that's okay. I always tell people you don't have to have the memory. We're just going to work with the body and the emotions. We can even work with a negative belief if we want to throw that in the mix. Sometimes I'll just start with a body sensation. Like someone will say, I have chronic, back pain. I'll go, okay, let's start with that. Let's just go with the back pain. And it's not a miracle cure all be all. So I don't want to make this like, oh, and then you have wave a magic wand and it's all gone.
Right.
It lessens, it clears it, takes it up and out of the body rather than repressing and suppressing it. So what we don't get to process in real time gets held in the nervous system. People don't realize that.
Yeah.
Like it's pushed down. Yeah. And then when we reprocess it, it's like freeing all that space that's been taken up by suppressing it. And so that's what alcohol does. It pushes it back into the body.
Right.
And so, or any kind of substance, it pushes it back into the body. And that's why it grows. Like people are like, well, I feel more dysregulated. I feel like the pain is intensifying because we're actually pushing it back down.
We alcoholics like to just keep it in there and prolong that pain as long as possible.
Just keep it going.
Let's keep it going. That's what we do.
It's better than feeling it is what we
do. That's right. Yeah. We're scared to death to feel anything. What would you say to someone who is just starting to understand that they may have some trauma or deeper issues to work with or to work on? Like, what would you say is a good starting point? Because obviously you're not going to go, oh, I think I have trauma. Let's do EMDR, right? Some people do, I guess. But what would be a good way to just start easing into maybe doing some deeper work?
The first thing I want to say is we're going to just say, yay for you. I want to acknowledge if someone's listening and you're like, I kind of am intrigued. I really have this pull with them, but I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling torn. I just want to say, we see you and you're welcome here. So first of all, that's what I want to say, because we're making it sound very easy. And I want to acknowledge that it's brave. It's courageous.
Yeah.
So the first place I'd start is one, self-awareness. We start with, okay, what am I like? Even if we can't like start with a bigger trauma, we don't want to do that. We want to start with something small. We're going to say the first thing is I'm willing to just start tipping my toe in the water with a feeling. And I go with 7 core feelings. So we've seen the feeling wheel. People get really overwhelmed by that. Some people love it.
That thing is overwhelming.
And people are like, I am going to shut down right now the minute you pull that paper out. Like, I'm not going to pull the feeling wheel with a million feelings. I just want you to pick from 7. And so what I do is I put them on a little note card for the client, and I'll say core emotions. And it's like anger. These are based on neuroscience. Anger, fear. If you've seen Inside Out, you already know these. Sadness. I put / grief. Disgust, excitement, joy, and sexual excitement. Okay, that wasn't in the Inside Out movie. And then I have them put this little note card, and I have them like put it in a place they can see it. And then I'm going to have them start just kind of noticing, oh, I can feel, let me see. What do I, and literally I'll say, just because lots of people don't know what they feel. They're like, I feel happy. I feel mad. They don't know what they feel.
Especially in addiction. I'm telling you, like in my early recovery, I could not identify a feeling to save my life. It seems so absurd to me now, but I could not label one feeling from another if you paid me $1 million.
That's right. And I said, that's okay. I always tell people, that's okay. Let's have a little note card where you write these out. Okay. And then I'm going to have you put it in a place where you're going to put it up. So then you can start going, okay, what do I feel? Okay, I'm pissed off. That's fine. That's anger. Okay, I feel really sad. Okay, now I'm going to have you write out. I feel sad because these sound really simple, but simple is better. I don't want people, and simple, I sound simple. It's not simple because you're processing. You're beginning to process. I work on breathing. If we don't have a breathing plate, like I do the box breathing, you probably already taught people on your podcast all about it.
Yeah,
I start every single session with that. We start naming and talking about it. What lives in the darkness will grow.
Yeah.
We start finding a safe community. We start going to a 12-step. We start going to therapy. We start building the support system so we actually can start feeling and healing. And so it really is a decision. It's a decision to say, I'm going to do this. And that's where it begins. It's a decision. And even if it gets hard, you're going to pull on your support network. You're going to work on it with your sponsor. You're going to go to your therapist. You're going to go to the friend who's also in recovery. But trauma takes a willingness to kind of go through the sewer.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough, and having the support to do it. And then I really think pets are therapeutic. Now, if you've had pet trauma, I want to just acknowledge that because some people have had pet trauma. I really think a pet can be extremely therapeutic when it comes to trauma. So whatever pet, it doesn't matter. We need a pet can show you what unconditional love looks
That's
like.
right,
Then it can access into a higher power that says, oh, this pet is showing me love. And that's really what it's about. Feeling loved and enough, and that you matter and that you have value. And that pet shows you that.
Yeah.
We don't talk about pets enough. I really don't think we do. And I have so many people that pets have saved their life.
Absolutely saved my life, for sure. And I learned some great lessons from my pets also. But it changed my life. Being a dog mom changed my life.
Yes. And we don't say that much. We're just like, oh, I got a dog. No, they're there. They teach us so much. They open us up. They love us. They show us no matter what you do, I want to love you. And that's really what we want at the end of the day. We want to feel loved.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we want to say, do you love me? Do you think I'm enough? We want to love ourselves. At the end of the day, that's what will happen when we do this work. We end up, now, do you always go, oh, you're wonderful? No, because you're human. But you end up having more compassion and empathy for yourself and others, and your pets show you how.
Yeah.
Really, they do.
Yeah. So good. Okay, tell everybody how to find you.
First place is Kristen D. Boyce, KRISTEN Boyce.com, The Close the Chapter podcast. We dive into all things psychology because I love it, and how the human and our spirit works, and to find healing. So it's called Close the Chapter podcast. It's everywhere, and it's free. That's what I love. Free. There's so many free resources now.
There's so many incredible free resources
right now with free resources.
Yes.
Your podcast, your resources. That's what's so awesome. I'm like, you can start with listening to podcasts. That's a huge start.
I start everything free. I start everything with crazy research, right? As soon as something comes up for me that's like, oh, I think I might be dealing with whatever thing it is, I immediately deep dive, Google and YouTube, and I just start collecting information. At all of my clients that are listening to this right now just died because I say that all the time. Collect information. Well, let's start collecting information. But that's it. Everything starts with a deep dive, collecting the information. Let me learn kind of the ins and outs and understand the language and understand what's happening inside of me. And then I can start getting to the solutions. And I will link all of those things that you mentioned in the show notes as well, so everybody can get there right from the podcast app. Kristen, thank you so much for an amazing conversation.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.